That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, I know a lot of y'all have wanted us to talk in depth on these late round rookies, and to be honest, I don't see it. I don't see why everybody thinks that this class is so deep. And based on our historical research on late round rookie draft strategy that we covered in depth in our Dynasty research book, we have found that usually going and drafting those running backs in the third round of your rookie drafts, they're wasted picks. Very, very, very rarely are you finding an Aaron Jones. The majority of the time, I'm sitting here drafting Darrynton Evans, telling myself, hell, if Derrick Henry ever gets injured, Darrynton Evans can step into that workload. And it never happens. When the starting running back goes down, it's usually somebody else. And guys like James Cook, Zamir White, Dameon Pierce, I think a lot of these players with the massive red flags that they have, they are not going to be exciting in drafts this upcoming season. Now, of course, that's not to say you need to trade away all your late round picks, but what it is to say is that instead we should be focusing on wide receivers that look like they have access to elite level ceilings. We have seen guys like Kenny Golladay, like Chris Godwin, like Terry McLaurin. There have been so many players that have come from the wide receiver position in round 3 of rookie drafts since 2014 that have made that significant jump in year 1, in year 2 to turn into cornerstone assets. I think we have some wide receivers that have that chance. But of course, before we get into them, please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, letting me know your favorite late round targets. Subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And if you want to become a better Dynasty Fantasy Football player, go get our Dynasty research book. Go pre-order our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide over there on flockfantasy.com. And if you don't want to purchase that, then hell, go get our Dynasty research book just by signing up to Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, where you can get into drafts with us in the live stream. Go draft against your friends, go draft against some people in a random lobby. But when you deposit $10 on Underdog Fantasy, they will match your deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. They will give you a copy of our Dynasty research book, over 100 pages of quality information for completely free, and you'll get our Dynasty rankings and our rookie rankings while you're at it. But that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into our first player. Gonna be at the wide receiver position. I'm not going to reveal his name. I'm sure that a lot of people will know who I'm talking about as we go through and profile this player. But let me talk about his overall profile and why I am excited for him. Now, how I decided to declare what a late round rookie is we are looking at players currently being drafted after pick 20 on Keep Trade Cut. And here, this player is being drafted as the 28th rookie off the board on Keep Trade Cut. His ADP on Underdog. Now, Underdog is not Dynasty. Underdog is just for this upcoming season, but he is not being drafted in those drafts that are 20 rounds long. This is a player that broke out right away his true freshman season. Y'all know we talk about all the time how important it is for players to break out at 18, 19 years old. We have shown this with our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide last year, and the information, the research is so much stronger in this year's guide to prove how important it is to have that early breakout. What you need to see is a breakout in year 1 or a breakout in year 2. That's more important than almost any other metric that you're going to be looking at the wide receiver position. And here, this player broke out year 1, and he did so in a multitude of different ways. He averaged 4 receptions a game, but at the same time, he averaged almost 9 carries a game, kind of like a Deebo Samuel type player, kind of like a hybrid running back. He had almost 80 total yards and half a touchdown a game. Now, he played in the Big Ten, and I know that the Big Ten isn't necessarily the SEC. I know a lot of people are going to trash it. Still, a quality school. It's not like Sky Moore, even though Sky Moore definitely a better player, but he's just a lot more expensive. But nonetheless, this was a solid team. He was second right away in receiving on his roster and third in rushing at the same time. Now he goes to his sophomore year, and here he continues to improve specifically as a receiver. He actually averages 57 receiving yards per game. And if you look at his overall market share numbers, that was 30% of the passing offense went through this player his sophomore season, which is impressive. If you see that as a sophomore, that's a great number, and we're ready for you to take that junior year jump. But to add on to the fact that he averaged 30 rushing yards a game at the same time, his dominator's already through the roof his sophomore year. And we see that he has that dynamic ability very similar to a Deebo Samuel. Now, of course, What you don't want to see is you don't want to see a pure hybrid player coming into the NFL, because very, very, very rarely do you see that pure hybrid player actually making an impact at the next level. And what ends up happening a lot is the Dynasty community, overall fantasy football managers, casual NFL fans will say, oh my God, this player is going to be fantastic. Just think of the way that this coaching staff can use player X. Think of the way that Cordell Patterson can be implemented and can be one of the most useful players from an NFL standpoint that this game's ever seen. Of course, that was a sentiment a very long time ago, and Cordell Patterson was used well this past season, but very rarely does that happen. And usually Cordell Patterson's hyped up, and then Cordell Patterson fails for 7 seasons in a row, as we see from so many gadget type players. NFL coaching staffs, they're not nearly as bright as Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is an offensive genius compared to the Matt Nagy's of the world. So you don't want to just see a pure hybrid player coming into the NFL. So what did we need to see from this weapon his final season? We needed to see a significant step forward as a receiving option. And what he ended up doing is he transferred. He already had a very large role at his school in the Big Ten. He already was dominating there, but he went, you know what, let's go to the SEC. Let's transfer over to the SEC, where he averaged over 102 receiving yards per game, which accounted for over 45% of his receiving production on a per game basis. Pretty much the exact same mark as someone like Treylon Burks on a per game basis in that same conference, his true junior season. And he also added on 8 rushing yards a game, still getting some carries, but definitely not the gadget player that he was at the very beginning of his college career. Now, of course, when you check all these boxes, you break out early. On top of this, you display absolute dominance with top-end competition against top-end talent your final season. Then you declare early at the same time. You check pretty much every single box that there would ever be to look at. He runs a 4.44 40-yard dash, which is exactly what you want to see, especially for a wide receiver with this profile. Now, I'm sure that everybody knows who this is by now. This is Wandell Robinson. And with Robinson, the reason that he's not going in the early rounds, the reason he's not Treylon Burks, because if you look at the production profile, hell, he looks very similar. At least that final year at Kentucky looks very similar to Treylon Burks at Arkansas. Is, of course, Treylon Burks looks like a prototypical Alpha X wide receiver. He has the frame where Wandell Robinson simply does not. He is very small, and that's why he has plummeted down Dynasty rookie draft boards. That's why this was a player that previously was projected to go at the end of the first round of Dynasty rookie drafts at the very beginning of the offseason or the beginning of the second, regardless, to now you're consistently getting him in the third. And I honestly was not thinking I was going to be that high on him after the NFL Combine until very similar to what happened to David Bell. I think the community has overreacted because, of course, it is a concern to say the least that he went in and measured in at 5'8", 178 pounds. Yes, that is a massive red flag. And in our wide receiver prospect model, he definitely got dinged because of so. But this isn't as bad as people are making it out to be, because I know a lot of people want to just leave him for dead, saying, you know what, he is way too small. If we compare him to some of the wide receivers in last year's draft class, Devonte Smith, I know Smith, of course, got so much crap thrown in his direction for being as small as he was at 6 foot, 170 pounds. But Robinson, his BMI is significantly higher than that. Of course, Rondelle Moore has gotten a ton of crap thrown in his direction for Rondelle Moore being a very small individual, 5'7", 181. Well, Robinson is slightly taller than that. So here, I understand the size is a large concern. And we learned our lesson with Rondelle Moore in propping up a player that was a complete outlier with his frame last season, even though all the metrics showed, hell, this is a guy you should be drafting. Now, the difference between someone like Rondelle Moore and Wandell Robinson is Robinson, we haven't seen injury concerns. This is a player that was able to stay healthy in the Big Ten and in the SEC. This is a player that was able to go out there and have 10 plus touches a game his true freshman season right away, and his frame has stood up, and he's projected to go in the beginning of the third round right now of NFL drafts. He's projected to go about pick 70. So he has an elite prospect production profile. He is a good athlete. He is dynamic. There's a massive red flag, and that's his size. But when we're drafting in the third round, what we are looking for are wide receivers with upside that, of course, some of these guys, all of these players will have their red flags. That's 100% going to be a thing that we have to worry about. But there's a big difference between drafting a wide receiver with this profile at the 103 versus drafting this player at the 303. That size concern is baked in. I'm completely fine taking Robinson in the third round, and I honestly didn't think I was going to be drafting him this offseason until he has just plummeted in these rankings. Now let's go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum for our next player. This is not going to be someone that is 5'8". This is not going to be someone that you have to worry about the size with. This wide receiver is 6'4", 205. Now, he has his own red flag that we'll get to at the very end. But let's go through and let's talk about some of the excitement that you have. Now, if we're looking at this wide receiver as a high school recruit, keep in mind, I mean, everybody's just drooling. They're saying, oh my God, just imagine what George Piggins would have been if he didn't get injured after his sophomore year. Everybody wants to say George Piggins has the highest ceiling in the class. George Piggins was an elite top guy coming out of high school. George Piggins was the 4th wide receiver in the country coming out of high school. This player was the 7th wide receiver coming out of high school the year before. I mean, he still has almost that same pedigree as George Piggins. He was an elite high school prospect recruit, which I don't know if y'all know this background about me, but really funny. I actually took a biostatistics class a couple years back at the University of Texas. We're supposed to be researching, I mean, obviously things in regarding to medicine. A lot of people had information on vaccines, yada, 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 massive samples. I did my research project and got a really bad grade on it because I did it on high school recruit rank, predicting what you would have at the next level in college and predicting what you would have at the next level at the NFL. And I'll say, yeah, obviously it's not what the professor was looking for, but it is what it is. It's what I was looking for. And what we found is wide receiver, high school recruit rank doesn't matter at all. Running back, it actually does matter a decent amount. Wide receiver, it doesn't. That's just a quick side note. I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody hyping up George Piggins because of that. But nonetheless, what I am excited about is taking a trip back, getting into that time machine, going back to 2018, where this was a wide receiver. I was 18 years old in his offense. Just stepped on campus, and he was playing in the same offense that had a wide receiver that was a top 24 option on a per game basis last year. That was a senior. Okay, let me lay the groundwork. Our player, the rookie in this year's draft class, stepped onto campus, and in his wide receiver room, there was a senior at that school that was a future top 24 wide receiver in the NFL. There was a sophomore at his school that was a future top 12 wide receiver in the NFL. And there was a sophomore at his school that was a future 3rd round draft pick in the NFL. There was all that talent there. And you would assume an 18-year-old freshman, what the hell is he supposed to do? We're just praying he doesn't redshirt. We're just praying that, the coaching staff thinks he can get on the field and be somewhat useful. He leads this team in receiving yards on a per game basis. He goes out there and has 71 receiving yards on a per game basis at 18 years old when T. Higgins was in his 2nd season, when Amari Rodgers was in his 2nd year, when Hunter Renfrow was a senior. Hunter Renfrow was 22 years old, averaging 36 receiving yards a game, and Justin Ross had 71 receiving yards a game in this offense at 18. What have we been looking for? We've been looking for that elite ceiling. Now, of course, we're in the 3rd round of rookie drafts right now. You're expecting there to be some red flags. And I'll tell you, we got red flags with Justin Ross. He had a neck injury, a congenital fusion. Now, of course, I'm no doctor. I wish I was a doctor, but not. So I can't tell you exactly what this means. But at the time it was reported Justin Ross done playing football. Justin Ross may never play football again. He went from being the top wide receiver in Devy leagues to just completely being off the radar. Now, of course, that was after 2019. In 2019, he did take a small step back. I will be the first person to admit this, but T. Higgins was in his junior year. T. Higgins had that elite level breakout. Higgins accounted for 27% of the offense at Clemson. You had Justin Ross as the 2nd receiver on that roster with 21%. This is a roster that had Travis Etienne as a great receiving running back. This is a roster that still had Amari Rodgers, still a ton of talent at Clemson. And he averaged over 20% of the market share there. So Yes, disappointing sophomore year, but going into his junior season, when T. Higgins was leaving, this is when you were expecting Justin Ross to take that significant step forward when he has to have surgery for that neck and he's out for the year. Now, I thought we were never going to see Justin Ross again. I thought Justin Ross was done. As I mentioned, I'm an idiot. I'm not a doctor. But Justin Ross came back in 2021. Now, of course, without Trevor Lawrence there, you had this Clemson offense just falling apart. So you only have 51 receiving yards a game for Justin Ross, which is a career low. But if you're looking at his market share numbers, that's 27% of the offense at Clemson. So a career high in that regard if we're looking at the offensive context that he had. So I know the past 2 years haven't been great for Justin Ross. But to see a 6'4", 205-pound wide receiver that went out there at 18 years old and dominated over a senior in Hunter Renfrow, a sophomore in T. Higgins, and a sophomore in Amari Rodgers. This player has talent. This player has an insane ceiling. There was a reason he was the number 1 wide receiver in Devy previously. He has a couple red flags. He's slow. He ran a 4.64 40-yard dash. I thought that it was slower. I thought he ran like a 4.79 based on some reporting that I found on Twitter. And I was like, oh, dear God, Justin Ross off our draft board. But no, thank God he didn't run that slow. Runs a 4.64, which does hurt him in our prospect model. Y'all know I say that really 40-yard dash times don't matter that much at all with wide receiver prospect evaluation. This is slow enough to matter. I will say that. And then also being a player that we have no idea where he's going to go in the NFL draft. Talon Walls is someone that fell based on his own injury history. He fell to the 4th round and all of a sudden was undraftable. With Justin Ross, I am very interested on where he's going to go. The reason I haven't just been hyping him up every single day this offseason based on this upside is there's a chance that NFL teams look at that neck injury and that surgery that he had and say, you know what, he's undraftable. He's not on our board. We're not even going to take him. And there's an outside chance Justin Ross goes late on day 3. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. Even doctors on the internet, doctors on YouTube, they're not going to be able to tell you sound advice with Justin Ross. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to wait for the people who were able to evaluate Justin Ross themselves, the team doctors that were able to walk into that room and look at Justin Ross. We're going to have to wait to see what they tell us, and how we will know what they tell us is where Justin Ross goes in the draft. If he goes in the 3rd round of the NFL draft, he'll be skyrocketing up my rankings. Now, our last wide receiver is going to be someone that I did not think I was going to be drafting again at the beginning of the offseason. This is a player that I don't really like his teammate in Jameson Williams, but I think we are probably being ignorant. I came out and said, oh, if I don't like Jameson Williams, how can I like John Mechie? That doesn't make sense. Well, I think that I can justify it if John Mechie is going to be going in the 3rd round of rookie drafts, Jameson Williams going in the 1st, and we put some context into this Mechie profile. Because y'all know, of course, I love my wide receiver prospect model, but at the end of the day, if it was as simple as just putting numbers into a spreadsheet and having a grade pop out on the other end, nobody would play Dynasty Fantasy Football. The perfect spreadsheet would have already been made. The perfect algorithm would have already been made. There would be no discussion. But we need to put context into these situations. We need to put context into these numbers. And with John Mechie is the ultimate wide receiver that needs context. Because we look at 2019, his true freshman year at Alabama. We can't expect anything. Like what do we want to see? On this team, you have Devonte Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and Jalen Waddle. And Irv Smith. Like, what are we supposed to expect? You got Najee Harris there as well. John Mechie, there's a 0% chance he's getting on the field in that scenario. Now, 2020, I actually like to see this. I was surprised when we were looking at this because, you know, Devonte Smith, he goes there, his senior year, has about the best wide receiver season of all time in college football. I mean, if you look at the Alabama offense, you look at Devonte Smith averaging 142 receiving yards a game, I think you could make the argument that that was one of the best college wide receiver seasons of all time. So I was assuming, okay, you got Smith there doing that. You got Jalen Waddle averaging almost 100 receiving yards a game through the 6 games he played. John Mechie, he didn't really have a role, did he? No, John Mechie actually accounted for over 70 receiving yards a game at Alabama his sophomore season with Devonte Smith and Jalen Waddle there. Of course, Waddle missed half the season, but still incredibly impressive by John Mechie that he was able to do that as a sophomore. Keep in mind, Smith as a senior, and Devonte Smith definitely a better receiver. Of course, we're not arguing that. What we're arguing is John Mechie could be an intriguing prospect in the 3rd round of rookie drafts. And we go to 2021, And you have Jameson Williams transferring over. And y'all know I've said Jameson Williams is personally a wide receiver I'm avoiding in round 1. I mean, I've seen a lot of people saying that he's ranked over Chris Olave for them. I can't get behind that. It's Olave, it's Olave, it's Olave. Please take Chris Olave. But here, 2021, you have Jameson Williams coming over and averaging about 104 receiving yards per game, and John Mechie is up there at 88. So the gap is really non-existent. They're both true juniors here as well. John Mechie declares early for the NFL draft. So we stack all these things on top of each other. A player that breaks out the second he can. I think he broke out when he could reasonably. Of course, if he was playing at a school like San Diego State, you would assume John Mechie has to go out there, break out right away. He has to break out either his true freshman or true sophomore year. But if you're sharing a wide receiver room with Devonte Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, what can we realistically expect from you? You can't be a wide receiver 5 on your depth chart and break out. No, that's not going to happen. So he breaks out in a reasonable time. He always has a crap ton of competition for targets, and he's able to create an every down role for himself. And from an NFL draft perspective, he should go in the top 100 picks, almost guaranteed. He'll probably be around pick 70. I'm starting to buy into this John Mechie profile. I think here you almost have to just trust the film guys. You have to trust the NFL talent evaluators because, of course, we need context with the situation. But if John Mechie does indeed go early round 3 of the NFL draft, possibly this is a Terry McLaurin situation. Y'all remember Terry McLaurin at Ohio State didn't really have any production. I ended up drafting McLaurin a lot in rookie drafts. Then I sold him way too low after his rookie season. I thought I was selling high, and yes, his value continued to rise, so we took that L. But nonetheless, here, we may just have to trust NFL talent evaluators and take a player that was in a crowded situation at the beginning of 3rd round of Dynasty rookie drafts if he ends up going in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. Now, of course, thank you so much for being a part of the flock, supporting the channel. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, go get our Dynasty research book on flockfantasy.com, or go get it by signing up for Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.